it's Matthew Griffin, better known as the Fanatical Futurist. Hello and welcome to this week's video blog. Now, I track over 600 emerging technologies, easily up to and over 50 years out. I track over 350 megatrends, and I'm a big picture kind of guy. Now, what I mean by that is I look at all these different things, all these different technologies, all these different innovations and breakthroughs, all these different trends, and try to figure out, so what? What happens basically when all these different things come together? What problems do they solve? What new products and services can they all be used to create? And frankly, who cares? So in this particular video, what we're going to do is we're going to go through the last 12 days worth of news. This is on the fanaticalfuturist.com blog. And also, actually, I'm really happy to say thank you to everyone who subscribed to the Fanatical Futurist channel. I passed 100,000 subscribers recently. So thank you for that. So YouTube were kind enough to send me this, which frankly, I have no idea basically where to actually put it. I should probably put it on a wall. It has got some little hangers on the back. The next one is at 1 million. And I think basically we're now starting to close in on that as well. So everyone, thank you for subscribing to this YouTube channel. I try to keep the future free. Speaking of which, let's go through the past 12 days worth of news, which ultimately, depending on how these all play out, some of these things could be our status quo in the future. Now, so let's have a look. I mean, we've got all kinds of different goodies here, and baddies, speaking of which. So increasingly, basically, we're seeing new account fraud, basically with banks and financial services organizations reaching all-time highs because people are actually, on one hand, taking, for example, a picture of an Australian passport off the web. They're then creating deep fake images. So I say, here's my passport. But then also they're using the deep fake photos that they've created to create deepfake videos. So basically when you go and sign up digitally to say a neobank, it will say send us a copy of your ID. So I send you my passport, and then it will say right in front of your smartphone camera, look to the left, look to the right, etc. Deepfake technology is now good enough basically where it's bypassing the vast majority of controls basically that these neobanks have to prevent things like just fraud, so KYC fraud, which ultimately then leads to things like AML fraud and so on and so forth. So it's easier than ever before basically for serious organized crime groups basically to create bank accounts with everybody. And most banks still don't, I think, have a particularly robust way to counter that or detect this stuff. And I'll be talking about that. I'll be talking about bank security specifically in Dubai in about 2 weeks' time. Now, speaking of things like future of payments and everything else, Visa is always trying to hunt out new ways to transact, but also pay people and get people paid. So increasingly, basically, they're trying to replace direct debits with account-to-account transfers. So rather than setting up direct debits, basically where you write everything down on a piece of paper and then you hope the piece of paper has been destroyed because it's got your personal details on. This is where the concept that Visa have, this is called A2A, is it's just a very simple online application, and you can set up your standing order and or your especially direct debit just directly from your bank account. So again, I mean, that sounds really stupid. It sounds really basic. Why haven't we done that before? But hey ho. Now, globally, basically, there is sort of talk of the BRICS Plus, which are sort of Saudi Arabia, China, Russia, India, South Africa. I think we've got Ethiopia in there as well. Turkey are trying to join, etc., etc. There's a lot of talk, basically, of de-dollarization. Now, the dollar basically is the world's global reserve currency, and a lot of assets are pegged to it. So as we continue to see de-dollarization increase, it's about 7% of the global reserve currency at the moment. That does actually affect your pension values, your asset values, and so on and so forth. So de-dollarization is a global trend that is continuing to chug along. It is accelerating a little bit, but it's accelerating slowly at the moment. However, when you have a look at the rollout of stable coins around the world, something like 98% of stable coins are pegged to the US dollar. So ironically, stable coins are helping re-dollarize the world, especially in countries basically where there's hyperinflation and fiat currency instability and so on and so forth. So even though you might not think that's interesting, I think it's interesting because actually it shows that while we're looking at one trend, the world is de-dollarizing. Actually, if you're not looking over here, then you're going to miss a bigger picture. And actually your information is going to be, and your information and your viewpoint is going to be flawed, which actually matters when we're trying to do future scenarios and so on and so forth. Now, what else have we got? So OpenAI recently released its O1 model. The O1 model seems to be quite unique in that it reasons like a human. Now, when you're using the OpenAI O1 model, it will actually show you its thinking. So some of these LLMs are increasingly trying to understand what it is you want them to do, but then they're writing down their thoughts on an internal scratch pad. A little bit like, if I asked you to do something, you'd think about it in your head first, then you'd say whatever the answer is. So increasingly, these AIs are actually using a scratch pad and chain of thought reasoning to come up with the answers. But their reasoning abilities are improving. And this is important because once artificial intelligence achieves human level reasoning, that starts opening the door to lots and lots of different AI capabilities that take on and probably excel human capabilities. Now, Anthropic's CEO, so flipping from OpenAI to Anthropic. So Anthropic has seen multi-billion dollars worth of investment from companies like Google and Amazon. They're building essentially competitive models to OpenAI. Um, he thinks basically that the future of artificial intelligence is what he calls a corporate hive mind. Now, what we mean by a corporate hive mind basically is essentially, if you think about a corporate structure, you've got a CEO, and then below the CEO, you've got the C-suite, and then below the C-suite, you've got VPs of different lines of business, and then you've got, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Then you've got the managers, etc. So Anthropic's CEO thinks that the future of artificial intelligence within businesses is that you have a master artificial intelligence that essentially acts as a coordinating CEO that divvies out instructions and then cascades those instructions down to the layers below, the AIs below. And those AIs then either work individually or work collaboratively to do something, to accomplish a task or a project. And then they roll that back up to the CEO and say, we've completed that particular project. This is interesting because it means that rather than having one single multi-trillion parameter artificial intelligence model that's kind of got its fingers on the pulse within the business, you end up relying on tens, hundreds, maybe even thousands of sort of 80 billion parameter models that are all kind of linked together in a hive mind kind of construct to get things done. The security implications of that are probably staggeringly bad. But I think it's probably a decent way to go. I can see how it can actually work. It's certainly more energy and compute efficient, basically, than just deploying a 2 trillion parameter model, basically, into someone's cloud. Something that conspiracy theorists will love. Nanobots can now enter your brains to spy on, or enter your brain cells to spy on them. So over in the United States, a researcher who's been developing this technology for the past couple of years has now managed to get to the point where she's created nanobots that are so small they can enter human brain cells through the cell membranes. And they can sense and gather intelligence on what that individual brain cell is doing. Now, that's important basically when we start thinking about it from healthcare application perspectives. But from a conspiracy theorist perspective, let's face it, they will love that because you can make a giant leap from a nanobot that is in one of your brain cells trying to sense it, figure stuff out, to it's reading your brain cell, then reading your mind and transmitting what you're thinking basically to the US government. And ironically, basically, when we actually have a look at conspiracy theories, I actually get quite a lot of emails from people who actually think that they are being telepathically probed by the US government. They're having their thoughts manipulated by the US government and God knows what. Um, but I can show you the technology that lets us go way beyond every single conspiracy theory out there. What I could do with that, I have no idea. Maybe debunk some conspiracy theories. Um, or maybe basically I could actually become famous on X as the chief conspiracy theorist. I don't know. Right, so China outperforming the West again. This is a very, very, very lame theme. Um, Again, doesn't necessarily seem particularly important, but one of the emerging technologies that I actually track are ultra low frequency communications. Now, why do we care about ultra low frequency communications? Well, firstly, uh, if we ever get into a war, then the first thing that's going to go basically is the satellite communication systems. We're going to see electromagnetic warfare on the ground, as we actually saw with Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Mobile networks are going to get wiped out, so we're going to end up having to rely basically on other forms of communication. Now, in addition to that, if you actually want to communicate, ironically, in caves or under the sea, you can't use traditional communication systems. So you have to use ultra low frequency communication systems. And the Chinese have just managed to use a ultra low frequency communication system to communicate between two Chinese submarines that were 16 kilometers apart, which beats NATO's record. And of course, if you have two underwater submarines that can communicate with one another, then they can coordinate and then they can go off and do something. So again, this is yet another example of the West being outperformed and outmatched, in this case by China and Huawei, in stuff that we should have probably nailed years and decades ago. Come on, what's going on? Now, this one here, this is actually worth looking at. So I think, broadly, analysts and the press around the world, anytime there is a new computing format emerging, I mean, like the metaverse, and so on and so forth, like, like some of the light field developments that we actually see with companies like Magic Leap, they say this is the future. The problem that we have with virtual reality is if you actually want to work in virtual reality, and I wrote one of my books in VR, wrote these things. So I actually wrote this part of this book in virtual reality. It's really interesting, but eventually you get neck ache from virtual reality headsets and you get disorientated. I didn't get seasick, but you get disorientated. It's not actually as much fun as it might sound. So this particular company here has, and they're called Spacetop, have created a pair of augmented reality smart glasses that replace your laptop. And actually, I think it's a fairly decent design. It's still cabled and everything else. But I can see myself working rather than like this, where I've got multiple screens. I can see myself replacing my laptops basically with some augmented reality smart glasses that allow me to have as many screens as I like, whatever backdrops and everything else they've got pass through, and working in that way. So I think that's an interesting one. And if they can get the price points down low enough, then at what point do they go to companies like Accenture and say, rather than buying a $500 crappy laptop from a company, I won't name any companies, why don't you use this? Because actually, I think this is much more functional, and I think it's got much better legs than the rubbish laptops that corporations use today. So another weird one. I talk about biohybrid robots a good amount, not loads, but a good amount. Recently in America, a research group managed to create a robot that was controlled by a fungus. So go and watch. So have a look at this. Have a look at the YouTube video. Um, this, even though, I mean, you might be impressed, you might not be impressed. This is the unison of artificial systems, metal robots and rubber robots, with biological systems. You can think of this as a cyborg fungus robot. And it shows just exactly some of the insane stuff that our scientists are actually doing. And then we've got three more left. So when we have a look at large language models, one of the questions that's often been posed is how do they learn new things? So, for example, today I've created an AI today, and I've tried to teach it maths, but it just doesn't know maths. I come back in the morning and it's learned maths. Now, when we have a look at the development of artificial intelligence, there are a lot of researchers around the world who increasingly say that we are discovering what AI does, not inventing it. So this is a particular paper from Oxford University and others that has tried to delve into why today the gigantic AI that I have has not been able to learn maths. But then I've left it alone and suddenly tomorrow it's a maths whiz. The general thinking here is when we have a look at these large artificial intelligence models, we try to teach them how to learn maths. And they look at all their different weightings and connections and everything else, and they kind of go, just don't get it. However, when you leave them alone, these AIs, it seems, will then explore all of the other neural connections that they have within the model, and they've tried 100 different connections over here, they've learned nothing new. But suddenly they come across this one neural connection over here, and they go, that is the magic stuff. And they learn maths. So if you're really interested in some of, if you're really interested in trying to understand some of the magic behind some of these artificial intelligence models, why they are learning to do new things, basically seemingly spontaneously, and we've had quite a lot of those, then read this one and read this paper. Now, staying on the artificial intelligence theme, one of the big problems that we actually see in the future is is the amount of energy that AI is using. So, for example, the average artificial intelligence factory data center draws about 300 megawatts. That's going up to 500 megawatts. And Mark Zuckerberg and others are talking about building artificial intelligence data centers that are consuming between 1 and 2 gigawatts of energy, which is insane. And in fact, when you have a look at Amazon, Amazon is now starting to power some of its artificial intelligence data centers with nuclear reactors. So when we have a look at the amount of energy that we expect artificial intelligence to consume up to 2030, the IEA suggests that it's going to be threefold. So it's going to triple over the next sort of 6 years. So as a consequence, artificial intelligence energy footprint and ESG credentials have been in question for a very long time, and we just cannot keep creating models basically that need a nuclear power plant like the 3 Mile Island power plant that Microsoft has just bought to power them. It's insane. So increasingly, I'm actually seeing and tracking different organizations that are trying to cut the AI energy consumption and compute by 1,000-fold. There are a couple of researchers in Oxford University who are doing well on that front. But in this one, Semron has now created a new what we call a mem capacitor, easy for me to say, that reduces AI energy consumption. That's it, losing me marbles. That's how you know I'm not a digital human. By 20-fold. So we are starting to figure out how to reduce AI's energy consumption, but certainly for the next few years, it's going to continue to go off the charts. And then this one, this is the invention of what we call a thermochemical reactor. Now, a thermochemical reactor is is an energy generation device that uses different chemicals in combination, in this case, to create thermal heat. Now, one of the problems that we see globally is industry like like heavy smelting industries. So, industries basically creating steel, glass, zinc, aluminium, those kinds of industries are incredibly energy intensive. So this new thermochemical reactor could actually help decarbonize the global industrial sector. We've got lots of other innovations that have come through there. We've got solar ovens, basically, which is backed by Bill Gates, developed by a company called Heliogen, which I've talked about before. But that's it, really. So that's the last 12 days worth of futures news. As you can see, the news comes in all kinds of shapes and sizes, forms and formats, and everything else. We skip across different technologies. We cut across different sectors. And part of the reason, basically, why I've got such a broad view of things is because sometimes the more you can see, the more you can get a point of view on. But quite often, the thing that disrupts you or the thing that changes the world is the thing that you didn't see because you're looking here when actually there's a huge amount of stuff going on over here. So this is why when you actually have a look at the fanaticalfuturist.com blog, the articles that I write are so varied and far ranging. Yeah, but there you go. So anyway, if you want to read up on these, then go to the fanaticalfuturist.com blog. If you want to see some of the videos, there's loads of videos. There's 170 odd keynote videos basically on Fanatical Futurist YouTube channel. And then if you want to download some of my books, I've got books on the future of emerging technology, the future of education and learning, hundreds of megatrends and so on and so forth, then go to 311institute.com, click the button at the top, and you can download all of my books for free because ultimately what I'm trying to do is democratize access to the future. I'm trying to help you think differently about the future and what we're doing today so that you're more future fit. So if you want to know anything about any of these individual technologies, or if you've got some news that you'd like to share with me, then just drop that in the comments and I can do some videos on those and we can talk through those as well. But for now, have a good future. Thank you for listening. Take care. Goodbye.